word. Padam, position. Tribhuvana, the three worlds. Utkrishtam, the best. Jigisho, desirous. Sadhu, honest. Vartma, way. Me, unto me. Bruhi, please tell. Asmat, our. Pitribihi, by the forefathers. By the forefathers, the father and grandfather. Brahman, O great Brahmana. Anyaihi, by others. Api, even. Anadishtitam, not required. Translation. O learned Brahmana, I want to occupy a position more exalted than any yet achieved within the three worlds by anyone, even by my father and grandfathers. If you will oblige, kindly advise me of an honest path to follow, which I can achieve the goal of my life. Purport by His Divine Grace. When Dhruva Maharaj refused to accept the Brahminical instructions of Narada Muni, naturally the next question would be what sort of an instruction he wanted. So even before Narada Muni asked, Dhruva Maharaj expressed his heartfelt desire. His father, of course, was the emperor of the entire world, and his grandfather, Lord Brahma, was the creator of the universe. Dhruva Maharaj expressed his desire to possess a kingdom better than those of his father and his grandfather. He frankly stated that he wanted a kingdom which had no competitor within the three worlds, namely the higher, the middle, and the lower planetary systems. The greatest personality within the universe is Lord Brahma, and Dhruva Maharaj wanted a position even greater than his. He wanted to take advantage of Narada Muni's presence because he knew very well that if Narada Muni, the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna, could bless him or show him the path, then certainly he would be able to occupy a more exalted position than any other person within the three worlds. Thus, he wanted help from Narada Ji to achieve that position. Dhruva Maharaj wanted a position greater than that of Brahma. This is practically an impossible position, but by pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a devotee can achieve even the impossible. One particular point mentioned here is that Dhruva Maharaj wanted to occupy an exalted position not by hook or by crook, but by honest means. This indicates that if Krishna offered him such a position, then he would accept it. That is the nature of a devotee. He may desire material gain, but he accepts it only if Krishna offers it. Dhruva Maharaj was sorry to refuse the instructions of Narada Muni. Therefore, he requested him to be merciful to him in showing him a path by which he could fulfill his mind's desire. Srila Prabhupada ki. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudhirayet mukam karoti vachalam pangulam gayate girim yakripa tamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Meshwaram Namo Vishnupadaya Krishnastaya Bhutale Srimate Indrinam Swami Namine Namo Prabhupada Pridasaya Jagannatha Yatrananda Murtaye Bhakta Sukena Krishna Kirtane Narasimhena Rakshataya Namaha Vanchakapatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Yevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai. So today we have a very wonderful verse. In this chapter of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, there's a wonderful discussion between Narada Muni and Dhruva Maharaj. And of course we heard the pastime from before when Suruchi rebuked Dhruva Maharaj in such a harsh way, and then he being insulted, him being a Kshatriya, right? It really touched him, as it's stated in Shastra, for a Kshatriya, insult or dishonor is worse than death. So he felt so horrible, and him being such a great Kshatriya, right? He felt so dishonored and so insulted that he went to his mother. And first, his mindset was revenge, right? And his mother, the first instruction she gave him was not to hurt or to injure anyone, right? But to fulfill his desire in another way. And so he made up his mind that he wanted a kingdom greater. And then his mother instructed him that the only person who can give that to you would be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so his mother in this way is his first guru. So him making up his mind in that way, he went to the forest, and he was so determined, and Narada Muni came. And Narada Muni, as we mentioned in the previous class that I gave actually, was that he was testing him, right? Testing his determination. So he gave him many other paths, telling him that, you should give up this anger, you're just a young boy, go play, you should be meek and mild, right? Brahminical instructions, as Prabhupada points out in today's purport. He says that you should give up this anger, right? Chill out, go and play, be a kid. But Dhruva Maharaj, being determined in his desire, he refused those instructions humbly, but he refused those desires and saying that it doesn't please my heart, it doesn't touch me, I can't follow those instructions, right? So there's many different ways of looking at the situation. One way is looking at it that Narada Muni could at that point say, okay, I gave you my instructions, you didn't listen to them, go look for some other spiritual master who can instruct you in the proper way. But at the same time, Narada Muni, you can see that Narada Muni was testing him, right? Making sure that his desire to see the Lord was his only goal, right? He didn't have any other way that he would be so easily deterred from his goal of seeing the Lord. And so Narada Muni was testing him in that way. But Narada Muni it's also the duty of the spiritual master to give an instruction to the disciple in such a way that the disciple takes it to heart, right? It's kind of like when you're teaching a kid mathematics and you tell him 5 times 3 is 15. And the child, that doesn't really make sense. What does times mean? And so you have to display it in rocks or pebbles. You put 5 groups of 3, right? And you make them count, and you say, it adds up to 15. And then they can go, yes, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of 3 makes 15. And so in one way or another, you have to break down the instruction or find another instruction or some other way for the child to really take it to heart so they understand. And so the guru or the leader or the spiritual master in that way, he needs to keep instructing the disciple until he finally understands, right? Repetition, sometimes it just takes many times that you hear it. Sometimes it's different wording. Sometimes it's different angles of getting to the same point. And that's why also the disciples, it's very important for the disciple when he's selecting his spiritual master that he selects someone who he can take his instructions to heart, right? It's not that different spiritual masters are necessarily on different levels or like that. We shouldn't put ourselves in that position to differentiate. But we have to select our spiritual master based off of his instructions, that we can take that to heart and they make sense to us and they help us progress in our spiritual progress, right? It helps us get further and take the instructions to heart. And so the spiritual master is trying his best to instruct the disciple, and the disciple is also trying his best to understand the instructions of the spiritual master. And then will come the best outcome. Right? So you can see here Narada Muni gave some instructions, and we understand they were a test, but we can also take a lesson by this example that Narada didn't give up there. Right? Dhruva Maharaj didn't give up either and say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but these don't really apply to me, so please go away. Right? And that's not what Dhruva Maharaj said. He continued to ask questions humbly and said, please show me a path that I can fulfill my desire. Right? Honest path, as Prabhupada points out in the purport, right? Honest path. He wasn't trying to just get the kingdom one way or another through niti and artha. No, he wanted to dharmically, properly, honestly endeavor and achieve it the proper way. This is a true Kshatriya, right? And so Narada, he continues to instruct him as we see further in this chapter, right? Another very important point that came out in this purport and in previous 2 purports also came out is something that I at least have been talking over a series of quite a few lectures, have been talking about material desires and approaching the Lord, right? That even if you have material desires, you should still approach the Lord. And Prabhupada in the 35th verse of this chapter, he says, the question raised here, the translation to this verse was that Dhruva Maharaj didn't see himself fit to follow the Brahminical instructions of Naradaji because he still was covered by material desires, right? And so Prabhupada points out in the purport that the question raised here is whether or not a person afflicted by material desires is fit to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The answer is that everyone is fit to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even if one has many material desires to fulfill. He should take to Krishna consciousness and worship the Supreme Lord Krishna, who is merciful. who is so merciful that he fulfills everyone's desires. Through this narration, it will become very clear that no one is barred from worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even if one has many material desires. Right? So there's no hard and fast rules, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, to chant the holy name or to worship Krishna. We have a desire. We should only go to Krishna when we want the desire fulfilled. Right? And then on the 37th purport, this purport, Prabhupada at the end, he says one particular point mentioned here is that Dhruva Maharaj wanted to occupy the exalted position not by hook or by crook, but by honest means. This indicates that if Krishna offered him such a position, then only he would accept it. That is the nature of a devotee. He may desire material gain, but he accepts it only if Krishna offers it. Dhruva Maharaj was sorry to refuse the instructions of Narada Muni. Therefore, he requested him to be merciful to him by showing him a path by which he could fulfill his mind's desire. So Dhruva Maharaj, he's showing the perfect example of a devotee, that the devotee may have desires, but he only goes to Krishna. He can't see any other shelter besides the Lord. And so he doesn't want it from any other way. He doesn't want it through, artha, doing business and becoming wealthy, then, gaining power. He didn't want it through any other way. He wanted it only through Krishna. Only if Krishna gave it to him, then he would accept it. So Prabhupada is pointing out that he's showing the true example of a devotee. Only one person that you have to surrender to. Only that one person. Only Krishna is the goal, his goal, and the only person he's going to go to for any problem he has. Right? He has no other shelter. So this conviction, this example is shown in many other places throughout Bhāgavatam and also our Vaishnavacharyas. One very, very profound example is the story of Sudama Vipra, or Sudama Brahmana, right? The pastime of Sudama, he didn't have material desires, but he had a problem. He had a material problem. And so he was staying quite far away from Dwarka, and when he was living in such poverty, he himself was so self-satisfied that he didn't need any of this. But because his family, his wife, obliged him to please, why don't you go ask your best friend Krishna for some help? We're living in this, abject poverty. Our son is suffering so much, we're suffering. And the interesting point that Prabhupada points out is that both the wife and Sudama had no selfish desires. The wife was simply thinking of Sudama. That Sudama is, so starved, that he's so skinny, he's not healthy. And Sudama was thinking only of his family, that, my wife, she's suffering seeing me in this way, so I have to do something as a householder. Neither of them were thinking actually material desires. In the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he actually had a material desire. But in the condition of Sudama, he had no material desire, zero material desire. He simply wanted to solve the problem, right? And he was very happy, and his only goal was Krishna, right? That's the only person he thought of who could help him. And in Srimad Bhāgavatam, it explains how far he had to walk to get to Dwarka. There were so many other pious kings he could have gone to and asked for help, but no, only Krishna was his goal. Right? He only, to satisfy that Brahmana for what Sudama needed to be satisfied and to be happy and be able to live a wealthy life, he could have approached anyone. He could have approached any merchant, any king on the way, anyone, but his only idea was Krishna. Right? And what did he think? The first thing he thought of, okay, I'm going to go see Krishna. What's the first thing he thought of? What am I going to take to Krishna? What can I give Krishna? He's going to ask for something? No. In his mind, he's thinking, I'm going to go see Krishna, my best friend, and I want to offer him something. And so the wife, also in that same state of mind, she begged from her neighbors a little bit of chipped rice, right? She had nothing in the house to give, so she went and begged specifically to go give Krishna. And they got a little bit of chira, chipped rice, and she tied it in a cloth, and Sudama threw it on his shoulder and went to see Krishna. And the whole way he's thinking, I'm going to get to see Krishna, I can't, my best friend, and thinking of the pastimes they shared together and the pastimes of Krishna. Never on the way was he thinking, okay, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. He's just thinking about, I can't wait to see Krishna. So he gets there and he sees Krishna. Krishna immediately, right, Krishna was in the Jai, Nrsimha Bhagwan ki Jai. Right, so he gets there in and Krishna is in the palace with Rukmini. And immediately Krishna sees Sudama, he completely forgets about Rukmini and goes and starts serving Sudama. Brings him, sits him on the bed, washes his feet, does full arti to Sudama, and everyone in the palace is wondering, who is this person? That Krishna completely is ignoring Rukmini. And Rukmini, there's different parts of the pastime, but Rukmini also started fanning him with a chamara, right? And so they start discussing their pastimes, how they shared their time in Sandipani Muni's ashram, all the pastime they shared in his service, the difficulties they went through, and they're talking throughout the night. So then later, right, when, they just finished having such wonderful time together and they're both, so much in ecstasy, Krishna noticed that he has that bag over his shoulder. And so he said, "What did you bring me? I see you brought me something. What did you bring me?" And Sudama was like, "Oh, no, it's nothing. He didn't want to give the Lord it because he realized that it's not worthy, right? This big king in this huge palace, and he has some old chipped rice, in a little towel, in a little, cloth bag. How can he offer that to Krishna?" And Krishna was so eager, he put his hand inside and took some rice and ate it and was so happy. He shared it with Rukmini, right? So pleased was the Lord. In this connection, there's in his future birth, Sudama, he was born as Shuklambara Brahmachari in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime. Right? He was born as Shuklambara Brahmachari, and the same exact pastime happened. Shuklambara Brahmachari was such a dedicated devotee, and all he had was a little mud hut next to the Ganga. And so what he would do is he would go begging to worship his shalagram. He would go begging, and in Bengal, at that time, even though the people were very pious, right, they would give in charity, but what they would give in charity was all the broken rice from the bottom of the barrel, right? They would actually, when in Bengal they still do this, but when they sieve the rice, right, then you get all the broken pieces. They would keep that aside to give as donation, to give to people who beg. Nowadays they sell it, right? More profit. They're not going to let anything escape. But in the past that was known. That was like for donation. So they would have that separated, and they would give to anyone who came and begged. They would give some of that broken rice. And so Shuklambara Brahmachari, he would beg that broken rice, wash it, boil it, and offer that to the shalagram, and that's what he would subside on. So this one pastime, in the very beginning of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, he was having this, what do they call his pastimes? When he sits on a throne and gives benedictions? His Mahaprakash, pastimes, right? So he would do his kirtan, then sit on a throne, and anyone who wanted anything could come, and he would give benedictions, just like he was the Lord of Vaikuntha, right? With his very Ashwarya Bhav, he would show these pastimes. And so he noticed that in the back of the hall, Shuklambara Brahmachari was there dancing in ecstasy, so much ecstasy. He was there just so happy in his teared cloth, old cloth, and he had a pouch on his shoulder. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and just reached in and grabbed some of the rice that Shuklambara Brahmachari had and ate it. And Shuklambara Brahmachari was saying, "No, don't. It's dirty, it's old, how can you eat that? It's not worthy of you." And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions that birth after birth, I've been doing this to you. Just remember in your past life, Sudama Vipra, right? And so Vrindavan Das Thakur, he shows that the Lord is so eager to accept any offering from a pure devotee that he doesn't even wait for the devotee to offer it, right? He doesn't wait. He's so eager to receive that love that the devotee gives that it really is irrelevant what the offering is physically. It's all about the love that the devotee had. So even the devotee didn't want to offer it to Krishna. Krishna was so eager, he took it himself, right? And I just thought of a connection to this is one time Prabhupada, he was watching, they made like a little video of the temple, and one of the shots was that Yamuna Mataji was frying puris, and the puris are puffing nicely in the oil. And Prabhupada, he was watching, and he was so pleased, he reached out like at the screen, and he was like, hum, he did like that. And so he mentioned that Yamuna Mataji cooks with so much love that when she's done cooking, it's already offered. Krishna is there eating everything just as she finishes. There's no need for the ritualistic form of worship, right? The Lord doesn't care about that because the love's already there. We, of course, cannot imitate that, It's like, okay, I'm done cooking, I can eat. No, it's all about the Lord. So we need to go through the rituals, the mudras, the mantras, everything to offer to the Lord. But the Lord doesn't need that when it's offered with pure love, when it's made with pure love. So receiving the pure love of Sudama and his wife in the chipped rice, he was so happy, so pleased. And so Sudama, being so overwhelmed with happiness, completely forgot about the question he wanted to ask the Lord. He was just so happy to see his friend. And so he left. He left the palace and he's walking back home. And then he remembers, I completely forgot. But it's okay. He got to see his Lord. He got to offer him his offering. Life's complete, completely successful. And then when he gets home, there's no home. There's a palace instead of the little hut he had. And he's wondering, where did my hut go? The king must have came and built a palace in my place. And then he sees his wife and his son coming out of the palace, and then he recognizes that it's his home, right? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur actually explains in that point that his wife looked like the goddess of fortune. Her body was replenished completely, right? The son also. But Sudama still had his original form, and he expresses that the reason for that is because otherwise she wouldn't recognize him, right? He was so skinny and, not old, but from such severe austerities and the poverty that they were suffering, but he didn't mind, right? So to recognize him, he still had his original form. Krishna didn't change him yet, right? But then when they went into the palace, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur expresses that all they would do is glorify Krishna, how merciful he is, how this. They remained completely unattached from all the immense wealth that Krishna provided for them. Right, the pillars were studded with jewels. The couches were all with gold and ivory. Right, they had millions of servants there. It wasn't one palace; it was a whole complex of palaces that they had. Right, but they completely remained unattached. It says even Sudama continued to sleep on the floor because that's where he felt the most comfortable. He was completely unattached. He accepted it and he used it, but he remained unattached. So this is the goal that we have: that any material desire that we may come to the Lord with, He may provide or may not provide, but He'll purify the desire in the process. Like we see in the example of Dhruva Maharaj. And what's funny enough is that in the pastime of Sudama Vipra, Srila Prabhupada remarks about Dhruva Maharaj. How the Dhruva Maharaj went to the Lord with this desire, with material desire. But after the Lord fulfilled the desire, Dhruva Maharaj didn't want it anymore. Right? Dhruva Maharaj had no attachment to it. In fact, he didn't even want it when the Lord came. But the Lord still gave it to him. And so Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that the best is that we go to the Lord with no material desire. But if we go to the Lord with material desires, we'll have to suffer just as Dhruva Maharaj did. Because after the Lord disappeared, what was Dhruva Maharaj thinking? He was like, I'm so fallen that I came to the Lord with these horrible desires. Right? Why did I ask Him for that? Why did He still give me these things that I wanted before I was reformed, before I was purified, right? So he was suffering like, oh my God, why did I ask Him for that? So Prabhupada mentions that if you go to the Lord with such material desires, then later you will repent, just as Dhruva Maharaj did. Why did I go to the Lord with these material desires? But it doesn't negate the fact that if we have material desires, we have to go to the Lord. We have no other shelter, right? Just by these pastimes. There's many other pastimes in which the same principle of having no other shelter is expressed. But these two examples of Sudama Brahmana and Dhruva Maharaj are very profound, because we see that even at such a young age, Dhruva Maharaj, he had one goal: to see the Lord and get it from Him alone. He wasn't, like Narada Muni could have said, why don't you worship Brahma? It'll take less time. Or worship Shiva, or worship anyone. They can give you this benediction that you want. But no, he only wanted to get it if Krishna gave it to him. Right? So when we have these material desires, we should only go to the Lord. We should only go to Him, and we will see that He will give us whether He sees it's beneficial for us. Either He'll purify the desire, or He will give it to you if He sees that you can still benefit from it. He will never give you so much that you will become distracted. Sudama Brahmana was so detached that he gave him such wealth that even Vaikuntha didn't have. But he completely remained undeterred and completely surrendered to the Lord. Right? Dhruva Maharaj, he was so purified that he gave him such opulence afterwards. He gave him the fulfillment of all his desires because he was completely purified, and the Lord knew that he would never become bewildered after that. Right? So the Lord will only, sometimes it's described that the Lord is most merciful when He takes everything away. But that's because the Lord knows that if He gave it to you, you would still be attached. You would still be bewildered. But when He's even more merciful, because He understands that the devotee is completely unattached, He's so eager to facilitate the situation of the devotee that He will give everything the devotee needs. Right? The example is also given that in the case of Jada Bharat, he didn't want anything. He acted like a fool on purpose because he didn't want to talk to anyone. Right? He didn't want to interact with anyone. He was like, okay, I'm an idiot. Don't bother me. Don't mess with me. Just let me be and enjoy the bliss of Krishna Kirtan. Right? So the Lord didn't give anything to Jada Bharat because he really didn't want it. He It wasn't like it was above a distraction that he was already not in this world. And only when the king very humbly asked and inquired from Jadabharat, then Jadabharat explained everything like a very exalted Vaishnava that he was. But before that, everybody thought he was a fool. So depending on the desire of the devotee, when he becomes indifferent, this lecture on Niranjan Maharaj I was listening to, that when the devotee becomes indifferent to, I wouldn't say material pleasure, but that he's not opposed to it, the Lord is very eager to give. Like in the case of Sudama was completely happy, but because his wife came and requested him, then he became indifferent. Then he became, okay, yeah, if the Lord gives, great. If he doesn't, it's also fine. Then the Lord was very eager to give him and gave him such immense wealth. But only when the devotee, when Sudama himself didn't really desire it, but was, if the Lord sees fit. So when that thought came to Sudama, then the Lord was very eager to give. But before that, no. Right? So this principle is described in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam 2:3-10, right? The verse Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udharadhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajate purusham param. A person who has broad intelligence, who has broader intelligence, whether he be a full of material desires or without any material desires or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. Right? So if someone has broader intelligence, whether he has material desires or desires for liberation, whatever he may have, he should surrender to the Lord. He should worship Krishna only. Then he will have the fulfillment of all desires, and not only that, when he receives the benefit of his desires or the accomplishment of his desires, the Lord will also give him the ability to become purified from that desire, to be purified from that attachment that he has. Yeah? So it's a very wonderful chapter we're reading. There's many benefits of the story of Dhruva Maharaj, and there's so many benedictions that are given at the end that talks about if you recite this at a certain time, a certain place, then different things happen. But there's a reason why all these pastimes are in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, because they all give us the idea that the Lord is the only shelter, the Lord is the only goal. And of all the different processes or all the different pastimes of the Lord, what is the highest? Braj pastimes are described in the 10th canto. Right? So it's all steps. It's all taking us understanding the uselessness of this material world, how we should guide ourselves through this by the example of so many different devotees and their situations, their pastimes. Like the first canto is all about the Pandavas, right? What happened after Kurukshetra, the disappearance of Krishna, all the omens that Yudhishthira Maharaj had, right? There's that pastime when Arjuna came back from Dwarka. I think it's the 16th chapter, I think. He came back from Dwarka, and Yudhishthira Maharaj, already before Arjuna came, he's asking Bhima, I see all these omens, this, right? And then Arjuna comes, and Yudhishthira Maharaj knows the answer, but he does not want to ask if Krishna left this world. So he goes through 15 verses describing all the different omens and describing that did this happen? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? He sees Arjuna is so upset and dejected, right? And so he's like, is it because of this? Is it because of that? Were you not able to give in charity? Were you defeated by an inferior foe or someone of equal stature? And goes through a long list until finally he just gives up and says, something happened to Krishna. So he did not want to ask. He was so heartbroken that he didn't want to ask. So even after the Kurukshetra, they got the fulfillment of their desire, to have the kingdom, to be unrivaled, but they didn't want it by that time. Right? They didn't want it. They didn't want anything to do with it. But Krishna still gave it to them. They had him as their only shelter. And Krishna still gave it to them even after all that. Yeah. So we can take their example, and if we have some desires or whatever situation we may be, we should turn to the Lord as our shelter, turn to Him to fix the problem. We have no other shelter. And whatever He does is perfect. And in the process of devotional service, we'll realize that. And so we remain unattached. We can become unattached to whatever desire we had and the result of that desire. And in that way progress even further in Krishna consciousness, yeah? So I'll finish there. If there's any comments or questions, it would be wonderful. So many comments and questions. No, Prabhu, you first. It was the three of you, Prabhu, but it's
Krishna. After having all these realizations, what you spoke, that actually the Lord takes care of everything, and even we as devotees, why is it so difficult to surrender them? Why we still can't just surrender? Why we not can really trust the Lord? What is the lack of our faith?
Because wonderful question, but basically, like you said, realized is the difference. Realize there's theoretical knowledge and there's practical knowledge, realization, right? There's, I think in Sanskrit it's called, but there's one before that. Yan, Vigyan, and no, that's the levels. I can't remember the Sanskrit terms, but basically, there's when we hear something, then we start to try to apply it in our life, right? Then once we are applying in our life, then we're able to express it to others, right? Teach others about it, and only that. Then, once we express it to others, teach others about it, then we start to have realizations, right? So only when realization comes, then full surrender will be there, because then you actually realize it and you believe it 100%. Before that, it's just gyan, it's just understanding. We read this hundreds of times, we heard it hundreds of times, but it didn't really sink in. Like Dhruva Maharaj, he hears the instructions of Narada Muni, but they didn't touch his heart. So we have yet to be touched by those instructions to actually understand them and to have full conviction in them to the stage where we never will doubt it, even throughout the day or throughout our lives. So there's still that subtle doubt that we need to endeavor. Like Draupadi, when she was being disrobed by Dusasana, she was calling out to the Lord, but she was still like holding it. Like I can fight this warrior of 10,000 elephant strength. Dusasana was so powerful, right? Just because Bhima was way more powerful, sometimes it overshadows the strength of the other Kauravas. But they were so immensely powerful. So Draupadi was holding, still with her own strength, trying to figure out. So we are still trying with our own strength to fulfill our desires, to stay attached to some material possessions or some material desires we may have. And we haven't fully given that to the Lord and say, here it is, you deal with it, you figure it out, let me know if it's the proper solution or not. So until that becomes Vigyan, until that becomes proper realization and belief, solid belief, then we remain attached. We remain on some level. There is moments throughout the day when we are able to fully understand that and we feel like, yes, it's true. But then the next minute, just like the elephant takes a bath, we throw again some dirt on us. We again, a few hours later, then it was like, I have to endeavor, I need some money for this, or So it's like a pendulum. It comes and goes, but we want that coming to come more often. We want, by remaining in the association of devotees, by studying Srila Prabhupada's books, those moments come more frequently and come for longer periods of time until eventually we're convinced 100%, and we're never going to forget it. So we need to get to that point of realization. And the important part that always came up when we were doing Sastra Chakshus is that application is the second step. So we hear it in Bhagavatam class, we hear it while reading, but how do we apply it? And only by applying it, then we can begin to start receiving some realization, some reaction from our practice that we say, yes, this worked. Someone says, if you do this, you get this result. You put these ingredients together, you get this result. Theoretically, we believe him, but until we practice it ourselves, then it's very difficult for us to fully take it in and believe. All right? And there's the three types of students. Well, there's a fourth type, but three types of students. Those who hear about something and understand it, those who see something happen and understand it, and those who have to feel it. They themselves, right? You tell someone, don't touch fire, it burns. Okay, I believe you. Another person says, don't touch fire, it burns. He sees someone touch fire, they get burnt, I understand, it burns. someone else, don't touch fire. I don't believe you. He touches fire, he gets burnt. Right? So we're the third type. Most of us are the third type. We hear it, we see. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is hundreds of pastimes of devotees achieving, perfection through different processes. And we hear it, but no, until we experience it ourselves, we're not going to believe it. And so we have to start applying the Krishna consciousness process within our life. Chant Hare Krishna, it will make a difference in your life. We hear it until we really chant and really try surrender. Then we'll start seeing the results. Follow sadhana bhakti, you'll start developing a personal relationship with the Lord. We have to follow it. We have to start doing that. We have to start worshiping. Then you'll start feeling that relationship with the Lord, and then you can start nurturing it. Yes, then you're going to become like Ramananda. But then the fourth type of student is that person who never learns. So we don't want to be that fourth type. He touches fire 100 times, he keeps getting burnt. We don't want to be that person. We touch material enjoyment, we get suffering. We touch material enjoyment, we get suffering. We just keep doing it day after day after day after day. One day we have to understand, we have to learn. So practice, application, then we can achieve realization. Does that make sense, Prabhu?
It makes total sense. I just feel a little bit bewildered sometimes, because when we more or less after, let's say, a person lived for a while in a temple, and then he's not happy anymore because mainly of desires, of some unfulfilled desires, and he want to leave the association of devotees and try it by himself, and so more or less it's also encouraged by this. It's also encouraged by the society, even from us. And then when he gets his realization, or it burns, he then leaves it all and says the process doesn't work, and he goes away. So that's probably the fourth type, or it's in the fourth category, but it's a sad happening.
I really think that happens because of lack of guidance.
What?
Guidance. It's so important. Guru Nishtha is the first quality of a devotee, and so the guru, having given permission, you're saying the society, but that person hasn't really. When it happens to that person, is because he really didn't accept someone as a spiritual master, or someone as a shiksha guru who can. So even when he goes and he tries enjoying material enjoyment and he suffers, he will still go to that person for assistance, for help, for understanding. And so through that person's guidance, he can help him learn from his lessons, from the suffering that he had to endure because of his desires, and then turn him again on the proper path. Because if you don't have that person that can help you in good times or in bad times, and you're willing to go to him, doesn't matter what the degree of the problem is, then devotees tell him, go enjoy, you don't want to be here, go enjoy. Then he goes and enjoys, he suffers, and then he has no one to go to. There's no one to turn to help him learn from the lessons that he learned. Right? So having a guru, or having someone that you have that you can confide in, that you can ask questions when something goes wrong. It's like a father, right? The father says, don't touch the fire. The child still touches fire, gets burnt. What does the father do? Yeah, good, it burned you, good. No. Oh, I'm so sorry, come, I'll help you, I'll cure, I'll put a band-aid, whatever is necessary. So he still cares for the desire for the child, even after the child neglected his instruction, suffered the result of the instruction, but the father still is there to care for him. So that's how the child will learn. That's how the child won't become bitter. That's how the child won't become remorse. Because that love. So you need to have someone that you can go to, even, okay, you didn't listen to his instruction, you went and suffered in the material world, but then that person is still there to care for you. You can still turn to him. So having that kind of guidance, I think, is the cause of so many devotees having to go through that. And even just in the process, not even that they want to leave the temple, it's just they come here, they dedicate themselves. I'm saying here figuratively, not Simhachalam, but they come, they dedicate themselves, but they just have questions, they have, doubts, they have this, and they just can't resolve them, and so they end up giving up and saying the process doesn't work, because they haven't found someone to guide them through everything, through their doubts, through everything. That's why Guru Nishtha is so important. Dhruva Maharaj had doubts about the instruction of Narada Muni, but he didn't give up. He asked more questions, Narada Muni didn't give up, he kept helping him. So yeah, we need that person. We need those people. Should be people. Should be you just have as many as possible that you can confide in. That you have whenever you have any problems, material or spiritual, that you can go to. Guru is there for that reason. That's why we need the physical guru.
So we need many gurus.
We need as many as we can get for him.
This one who gives you the best answer.
That's the prostitute mentality, they say. Oh my God, I remember so many times when I was young, I would get blasted for that reason. I would get blasted, I would get in trouble because, I go to my mother for something and she says no, then I go to my dad says yeah. When my dad finds out that my mother said no, it was worse. And then also in the Gurukula, same so many times, I go to this teacher for something, then when they find out, because they communicate, so I think I learned my lesson on that, It's Krishna, what's something that someone brought up is that when you go to someone and you get a particular answer, and even though it may not be palatable, you can understand that it was a super soul that directed you to that person first. Why not to someone else? Why did that come in that way? And you can learn something from it. You also, Prabhu, had a question?
From a different point of view, maybe it's the same topic, but I had this on my mind, thinking of someone also, that how does a person become Udara-di? Like, how does a person become broad-minded? How does a person develop this broad-mindedness that I have my own ideas, but I don't refuse, or I don't refuse to see the bigger picture.
Well, humility is a great part of it, right? By understanding that we have a very poor fund of knowledge, that we're very, our understanding is very small. It's like, who is it? Socrates who said, right? That I am the wisest man in the world because I know that I know nothing. Right? Was it Socrates? Right? I think it was him. It was either him or Aristotle, right? He says, I am the most knowledgeable person in the world because I know that I know nothing. Right? So the closer, I was in the class yesterday of Gurudev, Nirjuna Swami. He was talking about the people say, I'm so powerful, I can conquer, I can climb up, Everest, let's go. And when they get to the base camp and they see the size of Everest, then they become humble. Then they understand that, whoa, it was all talk, right? And so the more someone knows, the more humble one becomes, because he understands that really there's so much more he has to understand and so much more he has to progress. And so when we feel ourselves getting very closed mind and we're not understanding and we're not hearing what people have to say, it's because we're becoming more and more ignorant. We're becoming more and more stuck on our own desire, our own fulfillment. Like Ramananda Prabhu says that when we have a desire, we'll go to the person who gives us the fulfillment of that desire, because we're so stuck on we don't want to hear that it's not good for us. We don't want to hear anything about it. We just want the fulfillment, right? And so when we become disturbed by other people's advice and not able to hear it, is because then we're becoming more and more ignorant and closed-minded in that way. So we have to become more humble and understand that everyone has something they can teach us, doesn't matter who, right? And if it's not from them personally, if we have a difficulty accepting it from that person because we may have some difference of opinion in some other matters, or we don't like the person personally, right? Then we can always take it, the Paramahamsa is saying something, the Super Soul is saying something through that person. What can I learn? And that cultivation of willingness to learn from everyone, to take good advice from anyone and everywhere, makes us more humble and makes us more eager to learn, makes us more eager to understand. Yeah, so I think cultivating, in Hitopadesh it's described that there's different animals that you can learn from, right? There's different people, different examples that you can take. In the brahmachari, there's a few different animals that are given for the brahmachari. I can't remember all of them. Oh no! This is to do with animals. There's the dog, the crane, the swan, the crow, and the last one I can't remember. But basically the example of the swan will go to the dirtiest ponds and lakes and will be very happy there, even though it's such a beautiful animal and so exalted, and will be, when you see a swan swimming in a lake, he's so it's like he's just gliding over the water, right? but it's such a dirty pond where the lotuses grow, right? And he will take the best from the worst, right? So it doesn't matter who is giving the example or where you are, you can always take good advice and good example from anyone. And Chanakya Pandit expands on that good advice, a good wife, and gold, yes, jewels, right, can be taken from anywhere, right, can come. So good advice can come from any source. A wife can be taken from even a lower class family. It doesn't matter, as long as, the qualities. And jewels, because they're eternally pure, can be taken from anywhere. So good advice, if we cultivate that understanding that everyone has something good they can teach us and everyone is our guru in that way, then we become more broad-minded, because we become more able to accept and not so, no, I can only accept from a person who's perfect, and as soon as I see a fault in him, he's useless. Someone else, look for the perfect. We all have faults. So I think this is a great way to cultivate broad-mindedness, that everyone is good. Everyone has something good they can teach us. Yes, bro.
And then who becomes inclined with that desire to learn everywhere and from everyone?
Means, how can you become inclined with that desire?
Yeah, how does one develop that quality of seeking the nectar everywhere?
By understanding our low position, by understanding where we actually are, by being honest with ourselves and saying that, wait a minute, I am not advanced. By being introspective and understanding the dirt that we have in our heart, how much left we have to learn and how far away from becoming fully Krishna conscious we are. Then we become eager and desperate to learn, right? To get to progress, to not stay in the position, right? The examples I was given of you're on an incline, you're on wheels and you're on an incline. If you're not going forward, you're going backward. And so when we realize that we cannot become stagnant, that we cannot just be happy where we are in our Krishna consciousness and say, okay, I'm doing okay. I chant my rounds so-so, I wake up, X times a week on time. I do my service, kind of half-half. When we become disgusted with complacency, then that eagerness to progress comes. And when the eagerness to progress comes, we really don't care. Like a beggar won't care if it's a Shudra or a Brahmana giving them alms. A beggar won't care if the money's dirty, ripped. Doesn't matter if the food's in the garbage. He has no choice. He has no option. He's desperate. So when we become desperate, then we no longer start differentiating between people. We're just, any good advice, anything that can help me, because we're desperate. So when we understand our desperateness, when we understand the urgency of Krishna consciousness, then we can become eager. If that makes sense, bro. Yeah. Brian, bro, you also had a question?
Very nice lecture. Once again. And so one is about, at the beginning you said that Sudama and her wife didn't have material desires, but they wanted to do for the sake of the other. But I was thinking, isn't there some family attachment in this wanting of doing for the other person? So, and is it kind of like an extended sense gratification, let's say?
It's not so much that, it's more on the platform of duty and pure love, right? So the duty of a householder is to serve the other, right? To serve and to help them progress in Krishna consciousness. That's the main, right? But if, let's say, if Sudama Brahmana was on his own and wasn't married, then he would be fully happy, as is described he was, until his wife came and asked him, right? Right? He was fully happy, fully, whatever alms he was able to beg, he would just give to his family. His wife would take those alms, make whatever she could with it. It was probably just, something small, give it to the son and give it to him. So he would give everything to her, she would give everything to him. So they were completely selfless in their performance of their duty. So the confusion, it comes when you're saying duty and attachment. right? No, there's duty. You do it. You're continuing. And so if within the duty you have some responsibilities or some obligations, that doesn't mean that you're attached to it. It means you're performing your duty. Right now, he was in the situation of a grihasta. He had his obligation or duties to perform. He can do that without attachment, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Perform your duties without attachment to the result. Does that mean that you don't go begging? Does that mean you don't cook? No, your duty is to cook, to beg, to provide for your family, but do it without attachment. Right? So Krishna very clearly puts it in Bhagavad Gita. It couldn't be more clear. Right? Perform your duties without attachment. So in this case, they were performing their duties as a wife perfectly and as a husband perfectly. She came with the idea. He was very eager already to go see Krishna. He has been longing to see Krishna, and so he took the opportunity to go see Krishna. So it's just an excuse, oh, my wife gave me permission to go. So yay, bye-bye, let's go see Krishna. It was just another opportunity for him to fulfill that desire he had. Yeah, to go hang out with his friend. So he was so happy, Wife finally gave permission. Go have a boys' night.
I have another. Thank you. Yeah. I have another little question. So you said the Guru Nishtha is the first quality of a devotee. I wanted to ask where it come from and what are the other qualities?
The other qualities of devotee. Well, there's so many qualities as described in Nectar Devotion, Nectar Instruction, right? There's so many qualities, but it's the principle and most predominant, right? There's the qualities. Most important quality of a Vaishnava, right, is surrender unto the Lord, right? And most important quality in a disciple is Guru Nishtha, because by Guru Nishtha everything else becomes fulfilled. The example of Ekalavya is given. Ekalavya, Ekalavya? Ekalavya was the prince of the Nishada caste. Nishada is the lower caste, untouchables. But he was still a prince. They still had kingdoms and everything, as described in Ramayana, right? And he was eager to learn from Dronacharya, very eager to learn from Dronacharya. And so he approached Dronacharya, and Dronacharya said, I cannot teach you, you're Nishada, right? But he still had that firm faith in Guru. And so he went to the forest and made an image out of mud of Dronacharya, and every day he would practice shooting the bow in front of Dronacharya. He had such faith in his teacher, right? Even though the teacher didn't really reciprocate in any way, he had such faith. And so for hours and hours and hours he would be shooting in the forest. And so one day Dronacharya was going with Arjuna, walking around, and this dog was barking. And all of a sudden they came and they saw the dog stopped barking, and the dog came back around the tree, and they saw that there was 10 arrows inside the mouth of the dog without injuring the dog at all. Right? It was holding his teeth separate so he couldn't bark anymore. Right? And they were like, this level of archery, who could do this? So they came and they saw this deity of Dronacharya and Ekalavya shooting. And when Ekalavya saw Dronacharya, he paid full dandavats and, fully surrendered to his spiritual master. And so Dronacharya, noticing that Arjuna was a little bit uncomfortable, that there was an archer better than him. And so he said, okay, you took my instructions, not really, but now it's time for Guru Dakshina. So he asked for the thumb of Ekalavya, so that Ekalavya could not be a superior archer to Arjuna, right? This pastime shows the greatness of Ekalavya more than anything else, because he had such firm faith. He had no bad feelings to Dronacharya. Immediately he cut off his thumb and gave it to Dronacharya. Full Guru Nishtha, doesn't matter what. And so he achieved the accomplishment of his desires. He achieved everything through his Guru Nishtha. There's so many examples in our Vaishnavacharya line, but I brought this out because it's an extreme example of Guru Nishtha. Right? So yeah. And the other qualities of a devotee are numerous. I think there's 64, or I don't remember how many exactly. Yeah, but is nectar devotion or nectar instruction? I'm confusing the two. Devotion, the qualities of a devotee. Yeah, so they're there. You can go through. But Guru Nishtha is shown as the best, the most important for a disciple, because through that, everything else. If he starts to doubt his guru, then he won't go to his guru with his problems. He won't go to the guru with his doubts. He won't accept to heart what the guru has to say. When he has full conviction, just like Dhruva Maharaj had, and Narada Muni, he was convinced that Narada Muni was a pure devotee, and so he could give him the path. And so he kept persisting. No, give me a path, give me a way, don't give up on me. And so that full surrender gave him the ability to continue asking, to continue expressing his doubts. And the Guru Singh, Guru Nishta, and someone, I mean, there's no, like, I've taught a lot, you know, in my time. I've taught a lot, and there's no better feeling than a student who wants to learn, who really listens and who accepts. It's amazing. When you give an instruction, the student goes, applies, and is happy, you know, satisfied, and, you know, comes back, you know, it worked. Doesn't matter what it is. When you teach someone how to read for the first time, when you teach them how to do mathematics for the first time, it's such a good feeling. So that when you have a disciple like that, who's surrendered and dedicated, I mean, the example is given of Srinivasacharya and Ramachandra Kaviraj. When Ramachandra Kaviraj passed away, Srinivasacharya passed away right after him out of separation from his disciple. Ramachandra Kaviraj was a disciple of Srinivasacharya. And when Ramachandra Kaviraj passed away, that doesn't describe exactly how, Srinivasacharya out of separation passed away. Yeah, so their bond was closer, super close, because of the exchange of Guru-disciple exchange. So there's so many examples of Guru-disciple being extremely close because that Guru Nishta. And so when the spiritual master has a disciple with such conviction, such dedication, he feels more inspired to give his mercy. So Guru Nishta is the fulfillment of all the disciples' desires. So to cultivate Guru Nishta should be our main goal. Yes, bro.
Where Nishta comes from, and it's a funny thing. And I think Guru Nishta sticks actually with the soul. It's a principle in the universe. So we have the soul always is connected to this Guru principle, because otherwise, you know, it engages. It gives activity, it gives direction for the soul, otherwise we would hang in the universe. So we have this principle always there, and as soon this principle is applied, it works out. It's like with any master, you want to know anything, you need a master, you know, and you follow this master, then it works, and then it's around, you know, then the principle is always there. So I think it's implied in the universe. Therefore, we have Balaram, Nityananda as the Guru Tattva, as we say. So the soul cannot be separated actually from the Guru Nishta principle, because then it's lost.
Yeah. Yeah, very good point, Prabhu. Yeah, absolutely. 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 Yeah, Guru Nishta, the super soul is always there, right? Paramatma is always there directing the soul. And so we always have that guru-disciple relationship, whether we acknowledge it or not. And by practice, by cultivation, that becomes stronger.
Yesterday in a podcast, actually, by Amras, there was some devotee, he said that his guru told him, I kicked out the Paramatma out of your heart and I sit now there. It's a radical statement, but you know, kind of, because you said the Paramatma guides you, and then this is taken over by the Guru principle.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. That's true. There's yeah.
The Guru is a divine principle. It's not that the Guru is, I would say, puffed up or something like that. No, he knows that it's a principle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many. Yeah. Anyway, there's so many examples. One last one is the example of Hridaya Chaitanya and Shyamananda Pandit. So Hridaya Chaitanya gave initiation to Shyamananda Pandit, and Shyamananda Pandit in the spiritual world is a Saki, is a Manjari, right? And Hridaya Chaitanya is a gopa. So their rasas didn't match. And so after Shyamananda Pandit had his interaction with Radharani, received his tilak and was chanting the Radha mantra, then when Radharani gave him that initiation, she told him that if ever Hridaya Chaitanya, rebukes you for following this Saki Bhav, then tell him that even the Gopas sometimes assist Krishna in meeting the Gopis. So you're not doing anything wrong. You're assisting Krishna with meeting the Gopis, just like his guru did. Right? So when later on, when Hridaya Chaitanya brought this point up, how can you follow a different Bhav than your Guru Maharaj? You're doing Guru Parad. Then he told him that Radharani said this. And so this is a funny pastime like that. And then also on the later pastime, or the same pastime, after hearing that from Shyamananda Pandit, Hridaya Chaitanya, he hit him with a stick 3 times. Yeah, hit him with a stick. And devotees came to stop. Hridaya Chaitanya said, "Stop, what are you doing?" And so Shyamananda Pandit went and told the devotees, "Hey, don't correct my spiritual master. He cannot do anything wrong. There's nothing he can do that's wrong, so please don't correct my spiritual master." Full conviction. And not only that, he glorified his spiritual master. He said, "Today is my most fortunate day because my spiritual master has accepted me as his property. Has accepted me fully as his property, fully, with no hesitation. He's dealing with me just like I'm completely his." And so he felt very blessed on that day. And then that night, Hridaya Chaitanya had a dream where Radharani came and got in his case. Anyway, its pastime continues, but Guru-disciple relationship is very far out. Guru Nishta, full firm faith. Jai. So we'll finish there. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Dhruva Maharaj ki, Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.